Back in 1988, before the official start of the Berserk series that we would come and know to love today, while still in college, Kentaro Miura created a one-shot simply known as Berserk the Prototype. This would lay the groundwork for what the eventual story would become, and many things within this one-shot reflect the early Black Swordsman arc of the series, though with some very noticeable differences. So we need to go back before the concept of Griffith, before the God Hand, and before the Band of the Hawk, before the love story of Guts and Casca, and way before the lovable rivalry between Skull Daddy and motherfucking Zod. No, this is when the idea of Berserk was as simple as an angry man hunts down demons in a desolate medieval setting with a gigantic fucking sword. The details and specifics would come much later, and just as the Berserk series proper does, it drops us right into the middle of the story. The same idea to the introduction applies here. You could think of this as the pilot of the series, to test the waters, see what the publishers think, get the general idea out there in the open, and then once it's approved for serialization, go back and work out the kinks and the finer details. The prototype is just that, and does not connect to any of the Berserk canon. It's not a side story or anything like that. If anything, I suppose you could think of it as an alternate universe. It showcases the talent Miura had and serves as the birth of the eventual god-tier dark fantasy manga experience that we know as Berserk. The story begins with a view of endless death. That's pretty fitting if I do say so myself, as Guts walks down a pathway aligned with impaled corpses. The very first noticeable difference here is we see Guts is wearing an eye patch, still over his right eye, that he would also lose in the main canon, but for the actual series, Miura has always drawn Guts with his right eye permanently closed. I'm sure the first thought upon having a character losing an eye is to go for the eye patch, and sometimes that can work. Nick Fury comes to mind, and they even did it to Xander in the final couple episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Sorry, I'm a big Buffy fan, I gotta throw that in there. But I have to say, there is something about Guts specifically wearing an eye patch that just does not feel right in any way. Maybe it's just because I'm so used to him without one, but for some reason I feel like for Guts' character, at least the one that we are used to, that he would not even bother to want to try to wear an eye patch and would just go without it. I would say it's one less thing for Miura to draw, but with all of the heavily detailed art Miura puts into Berserk to begin with, I doubt one eye patch is what put him over the edge, and that's the reason that he decided to cut it out. Guts comes upon a group of bandits harassing a young girl. First thing we notice about the girl is that her design is eerily similar to what Griffith's design would be. That's not to say Griffith looks like a 12-year-old girl, but I think right away Miura wanted to hit us with the dynamic of the bright, elegant character in white paired with and against the gruff character in all black with Guts. And the next couple pages bears an extreme resemblance to the opening of the Black Swordsman arc in the manga. Girl is being harassed by some bandits, and in the true manga it's Puck, though it is a girl in the 1997 Berserk anime. One of the bandits is shot with an arrow from off-screen. There's one full panel of Guts approaching them, someone coming from behind Guts, and Guts whipping out the gigantic sword and splitting them in half. Given these two examples, I definitely prefer the Black Swordsman introduction, but this introduction here as the Black Knight, yes, Black Knight instead of Black Swordsman, is almost as good, and it goes to show that Miura knew exactly how he wanted to introduce Guts. I mean, other than that introduction. But I mean as a bold, silent, incredibly strong guy that gets the job done quick without any remorse. Similarly, I have just reviewed Miura's other one-shot mangas, and this is very similar also to how he introduces Noah in that one-shot, which has the same desolate landscape feel, only Noah was science fiction and Berserk is dark fantasy. Guts was just going to leave the girl here, but reluctantly gives her a ride on horseback back to her village. From Guts' design here, he has much more of a juvenile look as far as his body type and facial expressions go, and he makes some really silly facial expressions throughout this prototype. He seems younger, smaller, and a little bit more like a street punk than a full-on Kenshiro type that he would ultimately become. On the ride back to her village, the young girl named Frika notices Guts' left arm is false just like it is in the original series, and we are also introduced to the prototype's version of Puck, already with Guts from the beginning as he's been hanging out in Guts' satchel, and this is very close to what the original design for Puck would look like in the manga, and the glorious days before Chestnut Puck was even a thought in his imagination. I'm not exactly sure how common magical creatures are in this canon, but Frika says that she's never seen an elf, but is fully aware of what an elf is and doesn't seem too shocked beyond belief here. More so, she's just awestruck. Sort of like seeing an animal that you've only heard of before out in the wild. Also, this panel of Puck kicking Guts in the face is just priceless. I absolutely love it. Perhaps a prelude to Elf Dimension style. When they get to Frika's village, the townfolk are all panicked to see that she's back, instead of being relieved. The exposition tells us that a lord nearby was responsible for the impaled corpses earlier, and has begun taking women from the village. Frika was meant to go before being stopped by the bandits. And of course, seeing Guts as big and strong as he is and that he can handle himself, they request that he help them. To which Guts wonders why he would even bother risking his life for people that he doesn't know. That he is just a traveler and has no business helping them. And this really reminds me of, and especially for the time period that this came out, of Mad Max the Road Warrior. Mad Max in those films, particularly in The Road Warrior, was always displayed as a reluctant hero, somebody who was on the surface level very selfish, but ultimately succumbs to his more human, compassionate side as the film goes on, returning to help those in need. It's a trope that's used in many stories, and that many have borrowed from. Even Army of Darkness follows the root of this character arc. And I bring that up too because Evil Dead seems to have a lot of comparisons to Berserk, especially with the medieval setting of Army of Darkness and the fact that they both lose an arm. In fact, looking at Guts' original costume design, it feels as though it has a lot of Mad Max flavor in it. This is what Mad Max looked like in The Road Warrior compared to Guts himself, and in an interview with Miura when asking about the original concepts of Guts, the Black Swordsman, Miura said, "Yes, at first I envisioned Guts as a hero who can get angry, like Max in Mad Max or Kenshiro in Fist of the North Star. Miura said, I focused on how to make him angry, how to make him get revenge, and how to effectively display his appearance and gimmicks, and what resulted after that struggle was the original Black Swordsman. At that point, there was no Band of the Falcon or anything. So he had an idea of what he wanted Guts to look like and feel like and what the tone would be, but without any of the backstory fleshed out yet. So yes, even as an old lady who lost her granddaughter cries in his face and Puck scolds him for being an asshole, Guts still refuses to help them. And after he gets his free meal, he starts off on his own way. Frika is the last to stop him and asks Guts to give her something to remember him by, and so Guts gives her his eye patch, and perhaps Miura was already annoyed with drawing it and thought Guts looked better suited without it, even halfway through his own prototype. Another big change from the Berserk story we know is that while speaking with Puck, Guts reflects on the fact that his mother was killed in front of him, having her insides ripped out and eaten by one of them. And this is a huge change. For one, it implies Guts knew who his mother was and she wasn't just some nameless corpse hanging from a tree. And also that before the idea of the Band of the Hawk and the eclipse and all that, Miura's quick motivation for Guts' anger was that his mother was killed by a demon, and very brutally, just as how we know an apostle would do it. But I suppose it works for the one-shot. Building up a love interest and displaying that she had died could have worked, but this version of Guts doesn't exactly seem like one that would have a romantic interest. And I get that neither does the Black Swordsman arc Guts, but at least with that story as it plays out over multiple chapters, we are built up to that. Here, the idea of seeing your mother killed is something disturbing that everybody can understand and would make you feel fueled with vengeance and rage. As Guts watches Frika be taken in the distance, he sees the carriage is marked with a very different version of what we know of as the Brand of Sacrifice. More of a circular symbol than the sharp-edged one that we are used to, but it's recognizable enough. Frika is brought into the castle, and the Lord character I want to say looks a little bit like the Count, but honestly I guess the only similarity is that they're overweight, rich, noble-looking characters. But since the Count would be used as a primary antagonist not long after the prototype, it could have been an initial design that Miura tweaked later on. His name is also stated to be Vlad, which is a nice nod to Vlad the Impaler, since that's how he deals with his victims. Always happy to have a Dracula reference somewhere. Anyways, before the Lord is going to do whatever it is he plans to do with Frika, he's shot in the eye with an arrow. The right eye, by the way. And it is, of course, Guts coming here to rescue her, and instead of having a crossbow attachment to his prosthetic arm, it looks like he's just carrying around a regular crossbow. And this face Guts makes with this cheesy smile, I'm not sure how I feel about it. The Lord makes an initial attack of spears and arrows from a trap, one even hitting Guts in the gut. No pun intended there. but he just pulls it out like nothing, not even feeling the pain because I guess he's just that much of a badass, and then Guts draws his gigantic sword, getting ready for battle. And then we get to see the first ever apostle that Miura drew, or at least the first one added into a story that was shown to the public. Now, we know also that Miura is a gigantic Star Wars fan, and is it just me, or does this apostle look just like the fucking Rancor from Return of the Jedi? The battle doesn't last too long. The apostle snatches Guts up in his claws, getting close enough for Guts to unleash his arm cannon, a move that would also be used in the first chapter of the Black Swordsman arc against the Snake Baron, and has become a classic signature move when Guts is backed into a corner. He slashes the Rancor completely in half, again very similarly to how we would see him finish off the Snake Baron. Now, Guts doesn't go as berserk as he does against the Snake Baron. Here, the reveal is just that the Apostle sees that Guts has the brand of sacrifice burned onto his body, assumingly having the same meaning that he is marked and hunted by demonkind, but this brand is much more dramatically located on Guts' chest as opposed to the back of his neck. It gives off a much more powerful dynamic image in theory, but I think it was ultimately a better choice to go with the brand on the back of the neck. The randomness of the brand landing on you is a nice creative touch. Also, Miura would put the brand near Casca's chest, so it's good that he didn't have to repeat the placing. The Apostle uses his dying breath to mention not only is Guts branded, but it's a sacrifice to something called Vuana that is above the Apostles. Now, as far as I can tell, Vuana doesn't have any historical or fantasy meaning linked to it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Probably the name of an early idea of an antagonist that sits above the Apostles, and that's all. Whether it was meant to be closer to a God Hand-like character or more abstract like the idea of evil, I guess we'll never know. But interesting that they would name drop the big bad here without having any real reason to. Frika returns back to her village very happily, and Guts continues to walk the earth with Puck, searching for apostles to hunt them down and kill them. As the final page suggests, Puck senses the pure bloodlust Guts had while killing that apostle. There's nothing stated in the prototype that Puck has the same empathic abilities that he would have in the Berserk's main story, but you can tell Miura was placing these subtle hints here that Puck would serve as a voice of reason, and the one who would be uncomfortable witnessing the levels of darkness that Guts would sink to in his fight against the Apostles. That there is a part of Guts that is able to cut off the humanity within himself and embrace the savage nature of the kill. Even years before the Beast of Darkness and before the idea of the Eclipse, and before the back of the story was fleshed out, Miura knew very much how he wanted to handle the introduction of Guts. The prototype and the first chapter of the manga really do serve as parallels to one another. With differences, sure, but the bare bones outline of the character and the structure of the story are pretty much beat for beat. And from a creative standpoint, I'm sure Miura got a much better grasp of what he wanted Berserk to be just by doing this treatment. Seriously, if you have any artistic endeavor that you want to try, the first step is always just doing it. Don't worry if it's perfect, just start creating. Maybe what you make you will look back on as just a prototype for something greater, but maybe you won't get to that greater thing unless you start making your prototype. Life isn't going to wait, and the fact that Miura made this in 1988 and the following year Berserk was in full swing just goes to show you that if you want to make your mark, all you have to do is begin. Anyways, thank you guys as always for watching this review. I truly do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a like and a comment to help it within YouTube's crazy fucked up algorithm nightmare, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't so far. Also check the links down below in the description for my Patreon, merch store, and various social media links. Thank you again for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I will continue to review the rest of Miura's manga coming the rest of this week. Talk to you next time.